ourselves. It's nice to see everyone. Yeah, so herbs for transitioning, there's many. And I kind of broke up this class into 6 tiers. I have the role of herbs in transitioning, kind of like an overview. There's a disclaimer about using herbs for transitioning, which I feel is appropriate. Then I have herbs for like the more mask spectrum, how to support transitioning there. And then fem spectrum, and then a whole litany of energetic flower essences that are helpful for everybody, and sort of a grab bag of stuff that people can kind of tune into, and if it resonates with them, they can research that on their own. I think actually after the disclaimer, there's a herbs for everybody kind of thing, something that all trans people likely could use. You know, and I don't come here through my own, I didn't come here through my own practice. It's also on the back of a lot of research and work by mentor Ember Peters with the Wild Current School. Also, my mentor Stasha Stahl. This is Ember's website. Let's see. Let me see if I can get Stasha's website. And I also teach a class on this, and it was really actually pretty hard to take hormones and transitioning and all that is, both in like the energetic, spiritual, physical, scientific, like constituent based stuff, and like reduce it all into something that we can get under our like belts in the next hour or so. You know, that's kind of a lot. So I thought that my goal would be to just like give as much simple information as possible. And then y'all can ask me follow-up questions at different points as we go to each thing. I think that would be easiest because it's kind of a rabbit hole. And yeah, something that I like to, it's a rabbit hole I find myself in frequently with other herbalists who, most of the herbalists I know are trans in some way or have a lot of trans clients, especially being in the Bay Area. So the role of herbs in trans health is subject 1, which I guess to say that transitioning is a lot of different things, right? Some people choose to have transitions that have medical interventions, whether it's surgeries or hormone replacement therapy. Others don't have any of that stuff. Others transition in ways that are non-medical. And herbs can support basically anybody on any spectrum at any time in their unique pathway to their transition journey and story. There isn't really like a single, you know, the whole step-by-step basis of how to get there that we get through like the Western medical industrial complex is a little too binary, and there's many different ways to transition, right? And there are herbs for people who are on the mask spectrum, the femme spectrum, non-binary, gender fluid, questioning. It just, herbs fill in the gaps in such a wonderful way, and they're quite gentle. And typically the strength of herbs is that they're mostly safe to use with our own dosing, with our own experimentation, and they have profound effects, albeit sometimes gentle and slow. many profound things can come from everyday, gentle, slow herbs. So I'm going to be talking about how to help support people just energetically. How to help them with the questions of where am I going in my transition? Should I transition? What am I feeling? To stuff like herbs and protocols for surgery, to just ways to help hormone clearance, exogenous hormone clearance, stuff like that. And the big disclaimer here is that herbs can't really change secondary sex characteristics like pharmaceuticals. It very much depends on the person, but pharmaceuticals definitely are like way more potent and effective. And there's kind of a limit to herbs, which some might find limiting in and of themselves. I think for the best results, working with an herbalist to monitor your progress if you use any of these herbs is the best way to go, because they can take into consideration all the different stuff that like you might have going on in your body beyond just your transition goals, you know, like underlying health imbalances, or maybe some like genetic foibles that might get in the way of certain herbs, like, and contraindications, other medications like SSRIs and stuff. It's just helpful to have another set of eyes and ears. And there's not a ton of scientific research done on the effects of herbs and HRT. So it's very much like a lot of question marks. And I think it's very specific to the person. Just like all things, especially transitioning, hormones are such a puzzle. And each person is so different, the way that they manufacture hormones, the way they carry them, the way they process them, eliminate them. So basically what everyone goes off of in the herbal realm is both information compiled through speculation, clinical experience, and empirical experiences shared by the trans community. That's like our top elder, basically, is the empirical experience from the trans community, which you will often find not taken into consideration in hospitals and places that we might try to obtain HRT or help in transitioning, and may not be listened to, etc. Right? So I'm going to start with herbs that just work for everybody, and herbs that any trans person could benefit from. And the first two are adaptogens and nirvines. So trans people have a lot to struggle against, right? There's a lot of stress, there's gatekeeping, there's marginalization, there's oppression, there's dysphoria, there's mental health stuff, there's lack of access to jobs and healthcare and all kinds of things. So that's going to be stressful. That's going to be very stressful on all the physical, all the embodiments of that stress, physical, emotional, spiritual. And, you know, one of the precursors to hormones is cortisol. So in a heightened fight, flight, or fright response, that is going to affect our hormones in a pretty huge way. So to balance hormones in general, and to balance mood, and to balance things like depression, anxiety, panic, adaptogens and nirvines are incredible. And they're generally safe to take in tea or tincture in pretty moderate to high doses. Most are safe for like 30 to 90 drops of tincture a day, or like 1 cup to 32 ounces of tea a day. So adaptogens are stuff that helps. They're kind of a classification that is under some scrutiny, but they essentially help our stress response by helping it adapt to circumstances. And that's going to be things like Tulsi, Ashwagandha, Siberian or American ginseng, and for some people, rhodiola also are very helpful. And to me, the number one is Tulsi. I don't think people can drink enough Tulsi in the world we live in today. And it generally works with every circumstance. It's very safe. It's very easy. It helps with environmental, like removing environmental toxicity. And it's pretty easy to grow. And it's just like a gentle kind of like mint basil family vibe. And then often we pair adaptogens with nervines. So nervines work just on the nerves, just cooling the nerves down, toning anxiety. Some of them feed the adrenal system, which is connected to the nerves. And stuff like that is skullcap, probably the number one is skullcap. Wild oat is another one. That's particularly nice if you have kind of a jagged, sharp burnout energy, because it like directly feeds the adrenals. There's lavender, which is somewhat antidepressant and also cools the nerves. There's California poppy, which is like a super weak poppy family medicine that I always felt it helped with social anxiety, that kind of anxiety. And then there's Damiana. Damiana is also a nervine, and it can kind of help one feel more playful in themselves. Yeah, and depending, you can experiment with stuff like this, right? Like Tulsi and skullcap, amazing. Tulsi skullcap wild oat, that's also amazing. These are good during the day. They're good even in the evening if you're trying to turn down and sleep. Some people like catnip as a nervine, just for daily, like reducing stress. And also lemon balm. Lemon balm is also super nice. Very gentle, it's delicious. Another thing we think of is herbs for the liver. So the liver is where we metabolize all of the exogenous hormones. And the liver in general, especially for people on HRT, is kind of a place that gets stressed and overloaded. So we often recommend liver herbs for people. Milk thistle is one as a supplement or a tincture. Linden tea really helps the liver, especially if it's like pushy and hot, which sometimes you'll see excess anger and kind of like skin redness showing when there's too much liver push. Dandelion is very nice. And Oregon grape, it's also nice for the liver. And some people take bitters 15 minutes before a meal. Something like gentian and a little burdock. That helps us, like the bitters before a meal first gives us bitters to help the liver. And it also like gets the digestion primed so that when we do eat, it's all ready to go. And, you know, there is that like whole cortisol connection between like the gut biome and the adrenal biome and all that, and the mood. So it's helpful. And one thing most trans people should avoid is St. John's wort. St. John's wort is a great antidepressant, but basically most pharmaceuticals don't work with St. John's wort because it lessens the efficacy of any kind of pharmaceutical, like estrogen, testosterone, SSRIs are affected by St. John's wort. It's kind of a no-go unless you're transitioning without hormones. So generally St. John's wort is out. And I have some, so that's, I guess that's some herbs just for everybody. Are there any questions on that point yet?
Yeah, I just wanted to, this first is kind of like a comment. I just wanted to say that after attending your presentation, I want to say it was like last fall, went and bought myself a ton of like chamomile and a bunch of Tulsi. And yeah, I swear that the Tulsi really helped me through like a stressful time. And so I can vouch for that. And also the tip that you gave to just like simmer chamomile instead of just like steeping it for a few minutes was really helpful as well.
Oh, great.
Yeah. I only really do that when I have time and I'm like, I really need to get to sleep, but that was useful. And then I guess the question that I had was like, what is a bitter and how is that different from, I guess, just like, I mean, is that like a tincture or?
Yeah, so bitters are kind of like they're like a class of herbs that are bitter, and bitters stimulate digestion and they also often stimulate the liver, sometimes stimulating it to slow down and sometimes to speed up. And it just improves digestion, basically. Bitters often help stimulate bile production, which helps with digestion. And yeah, I think that's mostly what people take them for.
For sure. Is there, sorry, never mind. I feel like this is, oh, okay, I guess I'll just ask, isn't bitters like something that I guess like I hear about in the context of mixing drinks?
Mixing drinks.
Is that the same kind of bitters or?
It's not the same bitters, okay, although it's kind of like, it's almost like the same concept. Like I think the bitters is like an aperitif or whatever, and it's like a precursor to the drink or something. Not super sure, but
yeah, no need.
A little bit different,
for sure. Cool,
but essentially, like any plant that is super bitter is gonna kind of work as bitters.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
I had a bitters related question too.
Yes.
And also related affirmation, which is that I decided to start seeing an herbalist after your fall session.
Okay.
And it's been incredible. And they work in like 6-week cycles. So I get like a tincture for 6 weeks and then we have a consultation and then I get another tincture for the next 6 weeks. And so I'm in the middle of my second cycle, and in the first cycle, burdock was part of my tincture because I have a lot of digestive problems, and it was like really helpful. But I was taking the tincture 2 or 3 times a day, but not specifically at meal times. And I was wondering if you had thoughts about whether burdock or bitters in general are like more effective if you take them right before a meal, or if you're taking them regularly, does it not really matter?
I guess I think it depends on what you're taking it for. If you're just using it for like the hepatic, the liver, then you can basically just take those anytime. Typically they're in a formula in like small amounts. And definitely if it's to improve digestion and it is about digestion, taking it before the meal is kind of like crucial. And if you take bitters like early in the morning, it'll improve your overall like hunger throughout the day. That's an issue. Yeah, because it depends on which avenue you're taking it for.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess I'm going to talk about the mask spectrum stuff first. So in terms of masculinizing, just increasing testosterone and androgen should be enough to see some small shifts in energetics. Whether that's feeling more masculine or shifts in secondary sex characteristics. Additional protocol of estrogen suppression may increase those shifts more, but yeah, just the addition of more androgens or testosterones is helpful. And I have all kinds of stuff here, like, you know, there's navigating the side effects of gender presentation that's non-HRT and non-surgical, which is like, you know, binding and prosthetic packing. And those have some concerns with like restricted circulation to tissue. There can be muscle pain and breathing concerns with the ribs. Sometimes there's body acne and chafing. And so one can address stuff like that with making sure that there's times to like unbind, you know, and using a brush and maybe doing like a gentle lymph kind of like brush over those affected areas. Could also use, if there's chafing, could use things like violet and plantain, and just the plant kind of like macerated and just a little bit wet, placed right on the area, then taken off and cleaned, and like wiped with a witch hazel wipe would help. And if ever there's stuff like an infection that develops, or more, I'm thinking of like a fungus or anything that happens, I would use something like Oregon grape root as a spray or just a tincture applied right to the area, as it's like extremely antifungal. So that's some stuff there. You know, there's a lot of side effects of HRT that can happen. Things like hair loss. There can be a loss of deep emotions. There can be overheating or like anger. There can be increased incidence of type 2 diabetes. Decreased bone density, and possible increased risks of PCOS. And there might be some edema, which is like a fluid building up kind of like in the tissues. You often see that in the ankles and the lower extremities. So when we think about some of that stuff, we think of holistic support with those hormones, which would be to look for clinical signs of PCOS. If there's like a ton of rage, if a person is still menstruating, if there's a ton of rage happening or the cycle is shifting around, that can be something to look out for. You can support bone density with mineral teas, things like a mix of horsetail, red clover, nettles, and oat straw. Be really nice. And you can support the liver with signs of impairment. There's lots of different herbs to like, you know, like linden to You could probably drink a lot of lemon to like expel some of that heat, or try milk thistle. Sometimes that will irritate more, but it can be worth a try. Many people use this with hormones quite well. Or maybe violet tea would be really nice there. And of course, adaptogens and nirvines, like we already talked about. And these are the herbs with hormonal actions. So the first, I think the very top one for kind of like testosterone is going to be pine pollen. Pine pollen is like my number one. It's probably the most effective herbal testosterone. It can stimulate hair growth on the face and increase some build in the upper torso. And it might shift the voice a little bit. For whatever reason, it's kind of hard to find pine pollen, and you want to get it as an alcohol extract. Pine pollen is like in stores. They have it like in the GNC. It's supposed to be like, they kind of sell it to like people who lift weights to try to get super buff and like just rage on like gym time. And you kind of want to avoid getting products like that because there might be other things in there and who knows where they got it from. Finding an herbalist is probably the best way to go, and making sure that it's pine pollen that's in alcohol extract. I recently I found some in oil, and it irritated the liver. And like a baby, you know, all of these androgenic testosterone herbs, like a baby start might be like 5 drops a day, just energetic. And if you wanted to try to full bore grow hair on your face and you knew what you were trying to achieve, you might do like 30 drops 3 times a day. There's pine pollen, and then there's Damiana. Damiana is androgenic, and it could keep T levels higher in the blood serum. So it might be something nice if you're already taking testosterone, to keep it suspended in the blood so that you can uptake more of it, keep it in you longer. It's warming, and it's considered an aphrodisiac, but I just find it to be more like it invites play. You know, it's kind of a playful vibe. And I recently had a client that did some blood tests with Damiana, and it seemed like it increased like the DHEA, which I could not pronounce, in the DHT. These are like precursors to testosterone. It seemed like it increased the precursor of the precursor of testosterone in the bloodstream, and to the point where they're like, whoa, were you taking supplements for that? So, and those aren't, the double precursors aren't necessarily like androgenic, but they move more quickly to androgens and estrogens. So Damiana, hey, that's my plug for it. Sorry, I kind of nerded out there a little bit. Another one is ashwagandha. Studies have shown that it can increase T levels. Those studies were on cis men. And that's all the information I have about it. I haven't used it. I've used pine pollen and Damiana with people before. There's a plant called Tribulus, Tribulus. And that increases testosterone in everyone, but it also may stimulate ovaries to make estrogen in cis women. So it's kind of like, right, which way might it go? There's a plant called Muira puama, Muirapuama. And so that's also definitely androgenic. And it's something that you can safely take over the long term. And again, you can start with 5 drops small and work up to 30 drops 3 times a day. Many people say fenugreek boosts testosterone levels, and the plant horny goat weed, which is actually a plant. It's not just a pill at the corner store. But horny goat weed is actually nice if you're taking testosterone, because it might help increase the effects of testosterone so that it lasts longer, which means that you would have to dose less frequently. And it says here that it helps with like the last week of a cycle before their testosterone injection. It helps the drop in testosterone not cause so much of an emotional roller coaster. So that's pretty dope. That's worth having around. Probably a tea or tincture is fine of all of these. Most of these, because they're androgen and testosterone, they either have it or they stimulate it. I would say most of the research, you'll notice a lot of them are aphrodisiacs. Most of the research is comes from weird sources, like trying to sell stuff to cis men. And it's very kind of like question mark. It's very like experiment with these herbs. I know one of my mentors right now is experimenting with fenugreek. So that was their go. So that might show that fenugreek is quite safe. If that was their first reach for testosterone, I would reach first for pine pollen personally. And things that you want to avoid on the transmasculine spectrum are like beer and hops, because they are estrogenic. Soy, definitely soy. It sounds weird, but it can definitely have effect. And soy can have an effect on the menstrual cycle. So if someone bleeds, that's really where soy has the most irritation. So there's this product called Oxybenzone that contains a hormonal action that increases estrogen, and it's in sunscreens. And it literally just like, yeah. So Oxybenzone is, you probably could avoid. It probably isn't in like fancy, more expensive sunscreens, but I just heard about that this morning during a talk about skincare. And I was like, oh my God, I have to put this in my notes. Yeah, any questions on that spectrum so far?
Sorry if you mentioned this already and I missed it, but do you have thoughts on any herbs that like work towards preventing hair loss, but don't necessarily counteract other effects of testosterone?
Yeah, well, I think that that would be hard. I actually was thinking about that before I came into the class, and I kind of feel like the best thing to do would maybe be increase like supplements that are hair specific, because those are often non-hormonal elements. You know, they're usually just minerals and stuff. Upping your mineral intake might be quite nice. And also like doing like follicle kind of like stimulating massage would be really good. And some people will swear by kind of like soaking or like using nettles topically on the scalp, or burdock seed oil. is supposed to be extremely good at maintaining hair follicle.
How do you prepare the nettles so they don't sting you?
Oh, well, once they're in hot water, they're done stinging.
Okay.
So you could do something like where you either, you could like do a long, low simmer at like 120 or something like that. Or you could let it and then strain it out. And then you could apply that. I like to apply stuff to my hair with spray bottles so I can pull it apart and like spray it in. And you could do the same with just like, I think French presses and tea making is quite easy. And you would just like do the hot water and let that sit for like 8 hours and then rinse your hair with it. Maybe even a little horsetail or some horsetail internally.
Do you know, does rosemary help with this? I was told that like making a rosemary hair oil would be helpful.
Rosemary might be nice. I would almost do the tea over the oil because the oil is going to get kind of gnarly in your hair. I've been like geeking out with a hairstylist lately. So I'm so like hair stuff. I would stick with the water stuff first.
Okay.
And I think rosemary might be nice. It's really good for tone. It would be bad if you had like sensitive skin below, like here, like if you're getting any kind of redness, like it can irritate. I think the burdock seed oil is superior.
Okay.
And I guess like that's also an oil. And I'm like, oh, I just told you not to use oil. So I would break up the oil in water almost. Like get a spray bottle and put some oil in, but break it up with a little water and really shake it and spray it in so that you're not just like coating your scalp with oil, which would typically make you dandruffy. Make a human dandruffy.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. If I hear of anything, I'll let you know. But I think that those would be good starts. Get in all the precursors of hair and then like keep it stimulated and like really like the nettle, burdock, horsetail. Yeah,
that makes sense. I was worried about this I've like been on tea for like 2 years and I have male pattern balding in my family, and I was like suddenly became worried about it even though it hasn't happened to me yet. But I bought this shampoo that's like has these like herbs for blocking the conversion of DHT into testosterone.
Okay.
And it like was like an Instagram ad type of shampoo. So like I think it probably is doing at best nothing. But it does have some of the herbs that you mentioned. I forget which ones specifically though.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. I would just get those herbs on there too.
Yeah.
Set like your phone for like a cert so that you remember.
Yeah.
And then let me know how it works. I'm interested. Okay, are we ready for herbs for the fem spectrum? Feminizing spectrum?
Sorry, I just have like silly questions that would normally be very embarrassing to ask, but since it's only a few of us right now.
Yeah.
I guess I like does estrogen and actually like reverse like male pattern balding? I just kind of like felt like intuitively or anecdotally it does.
Yeah, it should.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I just wasn't sure if that was like actually like a thing that people have figured out. But okay,
yeah.
But it does.
It's a thing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yes. I don't know where my brain went, but yes, it does. It either stops it, slows it, or reverses it. Yeah. So, Okay, with herbs for feminizing. So feminizing is actually more complicated than just what happens in the masculine spectrum of just adding testosterone. Like, and that it's like +1 and you're good. But with feminization, it's like you have to +1 with the estrogen and also -1 with testosterone. It's necessary to suppress while you increase estrogen, or else the androgens and testosterones will inhibit, suppress your estrogen, the high estrogen level. Like it'll just convert. So for people who are looking to do that with herbs, it's good to be like, hey, don't just take the like herb with estrogen. You need to like take another thing, which we'll get into. And so there's navigating imbalance in the non-surgical gender affirming practices here too, with tucking, shaving burns and rash, or burns from like electrolysis. And there's, the same protocols that we had in the mass spectrum gender affirming practices. So it's with tucking, it's making sure that there's time to like untuck and do something like a lymph brush massage, or I would almost think like just drinking a little ginger tea to bring some warmth and like circulation to the reproductive area. With shaving burns and rash, it can be helpful to have a lot of aloe on deck. Aloe is very good for that. As well as things like rose and violet as a kind of skin wash. These are super nice, very soothing. And calendula as well. Those can be applied to the skin, either like the tea water or a poultice, just a mashed up plant with a little water enough to be kind of like a paste. And drinking it while you're doing it really helps, because then you're kind of coming from the outside and then moving inside out with the intake of all the nice stuff. So those are helpful. Imbalances that let's see. So side effects of HRT, navigating some of the negative side effects would be there's an increased risk of stroke. There's a rise in metabolic syndromes. There's liver disease, liver enzyme related liver disease. There's an elevated amount of potassium and creatinine in the blood due to the spironolactone, the T blocker. In the long term, there can be weight gain. There can be decreased libido and like sexual function. And nocturia, which is peeing at night. And I would also put just like excessive urinary push, or like peeing all the time. Because the T blocker is a strong diuretic, which is a medication that makes one pee. It's almost like you're peeing out all of the testosterone, which isn't actually what's happening, but the spironolactone is like, it's a chemical version of I don't know if it's like a hormone or a chemical that's found in the kidneys. So there's a lot of kidney action when you take it. And so support with herbs would look like avoiding diuretics, avoiding the plants that make one pee a lot, or if you're going to use diuretics, using them like before 12 in the afternoon. So that one isn't like making nocturia worse or having to pee at night or, and so diuretics are things like dandelion and nettles and burdock. Sometimes yarrow can be a little bit of a diuretic. So just trying to avoid those, or just using them early in the day because they're quite lovely. Dandelion might actually be super nice for an overworked liver, but if you're taking it all the time and you're already on a diuretic, you might just be like double peeing, which is uncomfortable, and that can make workplace time difficult, and urgency, all of that stuff can add to anxiety and uncomfortableness, which is like the antithesis of why someone would want to transition. It's like try to be more comfortable. Definitely liver support is huge. Liver support is huge for everyone on exogenous hormones. So a lot of people will use milk thistle. It supports the liver. It helps it regenerate. There's some reports that sometimes it will bring too much liver heat to folks, but many trans people use it with no issue. Something like linden to help clear heat from the liver. So if the liver's overworked, linden will like disperse that heat. That's quite lovely as just a tea. Oregon grape is another one that is really good at balancing the liver, releasing bile, make sure you have a healthy amount of bile happening. Burdock is also really nice for the liver, but it's a diuretic. So that's like, maybe you just want to take it in the morning. And then for the peeing and stuff, so there's urinary tract astringents. So an astringent tightens a tissue. And so there's a herb called couchgrass. Its first name is agropyrons, agropyrons. So that's like a urinary tract astringent, and that can be super helpful in just holding liquid. That's very safe, and something to the tune of like 30 to 90 drops. Sometimes even like 2 or 3 times a day, or in an extreme case, like just taking it every hour or two, like at night before sleep, if you have nocturia, can be very helpful to stop that. Drinking cold infusions of marshmallow is good for the urinary tract because it's a demulcent, and it basically like, yeah, it just feeds all of your like intestinal lining and stomach with what is the word I'm thinking of here? It helps all the smooth muscle and all of like the pores and stuff. So it's like you absorb more. It really helps you absorb more water and hold it in. And that's something where you'd like steep a quart jar of this much marshmallow overnight, and the next morning strain it out with a muslin bag. So all the glocky, weird, clear stuff comes out, and you drink that. And that can also help with kind of like benign UTIs and stuff. It can help clear that out. Yeah, so those are some for that. Definitely maintaining electrolyte levels are huge for people on the fem spectrum because there's a loss of electrolytes through using spironolactone, which is kind of like a, you know, since you're peeing so often, you're losing a lot of salts. Definitely with so much potassium in the body, using the tea blocker, avoiding things like banana or the herb licorice. You don't really want to use those so much. You know, reducing the chances of blood clots with herbal thinners and circulatory tonics. So a little yarrow tea, a baby aspirin in the morning, one of those like 81 milligram things. A little tea of white willow. Some meadow sweet. These can all be teas, and they're all, most of those are salicylate rich, so they're kind of the same constituent as aspirin. So those are helpful to kind of thin out the blood.
Hey Violet, sorry to interrupt your flow,
Yeah.
but just because we had a couple people join just now, could you
Okay.
give a quick like what is it that you're the category of like things you're talking about right now?
Okay, yes. We went through trans mask herbs, and now we're in like trans feminine herbs. And we're sort of talking about mitigating the side effects of HRT and estrogen and tea. You did miss it, but it's recorded. It's recorded. You can watch it over and over again. Yeah, and hopefully there'll be some time for questions. This isn't too much longer here. So herbs with hormonal actions for the trans femme spectrum, black cohosh is our big miracle drug. That one either contains phytoestrogens or it stimulates the production of estrogen. It's herbalist around the fence, and it's safe to use with exogenous estrogen and spironolactone. It's helpful to maintain estrogen levels between missed doses. So it's a good one to have like with you when you travel. Because if you miss doses, your estrogen level dips, and this is going to help like bring up the floor of that missing it. And I think it helps the efficacy of exogenous hormones. So I always feel like, yeah, it's like, oh, if I'm going to travel somewhere, I have it with me just in case. And if anyone has ever gotten drugs in the United States, you know that there's a lag in getting them all the time. So it's helpful to have it when like you just can't fulfill the script. So then there's Vitex. This is one for people who are not on HRT. It's pretty unpredictable, and it's not appropriate to co-administer with HRT, but its old school name was chasteberry, and it was given to monks to reduce testosterone to like, keep them pure or whatever they were trying to do. But it's kind of more of a hormone balancer, but it's got a trend towards lowering androgen and testosterone. So that might be something to look towards. It tastes a little ghastly, and it might take a month or two to work. But I think it's a good option to have on the table for sure. And then there's spearmint, which is only just recently coming out as to be an androgen testosterone inhibitor or suppressor, with like very little side effects. So how cool is that? It can reduce facial hair in cis women. And that's just, a lot of herbs have been studied with like menopausal women. So it's like a lot of literature pulls that out. And it may not always be applicable to everyone transitioning, but that's what the notes come from. So this is good just as a tea. I drink like 32 ounces a day. Well, I actually have a huge tea, but I just use like 1 or 2 teaspoons a day. You can just drink 2 regular mugs of tea. And yeah, I think the fact that there's kind of a safe androgen testosterone inhibitor is huge. And I think using it with spironolactone is fine. So I have here, and also, so you'll see a lot of people say wild yam has progesterone. And that isn't really true. Wild yam can stimulate some progesterone. It's used with like menstrual health, but all of the like products made from wild yam, basically they took wild yam and put it in a crazy like giant factory, and the end product has almost nothing to do with the original plant that they used. They literally derived one constituent, connected it to a couple others, and then you have a progesterone. So you don't get progesterone from it, but progesterone creams are actually quite helpful for like increasing breast growth. That is actually pretty tight. And a lot of people talk about that helping a lot. So things to avoid on the trans feminine spectrum would be like nettle root, because that inhibits estrogen. Pine pollen, basically a lot of the mask spectrum stuff, like you could avoid. And I think that it's worth noting that it's cool to experiment. And, you know, there are like androgenic herbs that I take with, not like frequently, but like I'll take now and again. And I'm not super worried about it like smushing my estrogen levels as a trans person. Like wild oat is one I have in the Nirvines, and that's said to be like masculine herb. And I'm not super sure if they mean just like energetically or not, or physically, but I use it all the time and it's like okay for me. Another person might feel that and be like, not for me. But really it's like these big ones like black cohosh, pine pollen, Vitex. Those are the kind of the ones that like you should sort of avoid or stick to depending on like what side of the spectrum you're on. Yeah, and then I have like a really long list of flower essences for people to use, but does anyone have questions? Who said they didn't know? Okay, yes.
Oh, sorry. I was just wondering if you could comment on sort of how effective, because you had mentioned progesterone creams, how effective that is versus sort of like, I guess like one, if they're, because I don't know, I've been kind of like avoiding progesterone creams because I just hear that they aren't so effective, or they're just like highly synthetic in a way that may not actually be helpful, or and so I guess I was wondering if you can recommend like sort of herbal alternatives, or, and kind of, this is kind of a separate but related question, or like how do progesterone creams compare to sort of orally ingested progesterone?
I think they would compare differently. Progesterone, you see it, progesterone is not prescribed as often as estrogen. I think because it has some more like, I just used the term earlier. It's a little bit more unpredictable and it has some different side effects, right? That I think like general practice isn't really into. Here, let me look it up right now. Testosterone. I think progesterone is weird sometimes because progesterone is a precursor to testosterone. And I wonder if that in like a trans body would like just be converted to testosterone. I think I've always wanted to take progesterone and estrogen, but they're not really supposed to. So it'd be kind of like you'd be experimenting for the whole team. And
full disclosure, I'm taking both.
Okay, well, tight. I think that's awesome. I think the only positive of the cream would be that it'd be so locally specific, you know, and I think it would maybe enhance the effect because you're taking it orally. And, you know, like any kind of like anything you put on like exterior that you're also taking internally, I just feel like it increases the efficacy. But I guess I recommended progesterone cream over just progesterone because it's kind of safer to recommend. And it's harder to get doctors to prescribe both, or sometimes harder to get people to want to take two things.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I noticed that in the chat there are people asking, but I did want to I did also want to ask you, Violet, also about if there are sort of herbal alternatives to topical kind of like pharmaceutical progesterone.
I have no idea actually, but I could definitely try to find out. I feel like I could just text the mega list of herbalists who it's just like a list of geeking out. But I could text them. I wouldn't be surprised if there was very few like organic options or whatever, because the process seems so mechanized, making the progesterone. Sure.
Yeah, just curious.
It's a good question. Now I'm curious.
I have like 2 to 3 questions.
Okay.
Well, Kai in the chat is asking, do you have a group chat with other herbalists? Sounds like yes.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, my 2 questions are, one, do you have any recommendations for like herbs that just like taste really bad? Like is there like another kind of tea that you could put them in that would like kind of mitigate the taste without mitigating the effects, or like juice? Like what's the solution for herbs that just taste bad? That's my first question.
Okay. Yeah, herbs that taste bad have low compliance. People don't take them very often. That's what that means. And you could get them in supplement form. You know, you could get a grinder and put them in your own little sup things like they have at what is that place near Staff of Life, the herb room down in Santa Cruz. Yeah, they probably have the little pill things down there, so you could do that. You might actually lose, supplements are harder to digest, we often excrete more, but that's one way. Another way is to, add something that tastes really good to it. People often, like, if it's something that's glocky and sticky and gross, people often use things like papaya juice and like sweet, thicker juices like that. And mints are a dandy for making something palatable.
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't want to do spearmint, like peppermint, yerba buena would be super nice. I think mint might be where it's at.
Cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's also an old thing where you like do this.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm doing, because I've been taking passion flower sometimes, and passion flower tastes really bad.
Oh, interesting.
I just do the nose thing, but
okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna try some juice instead.
Yeah, or just try putting it, if you take the whole dose and put it in 8 ounces of water, and as long as you drink the 8 ounces of water.
I can't handle it still.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe we should get that as a supplement.
Yeah, I might. I have another question though, which totally fine if you don't know anything about this, but I once read a study that was done recently, like in the last 5 or 10 years, that said that pregnant people who were on some kind of exogenous progesterone, like some kind of like progesterone supplement or something, like had a higher likelihood of having babies who turned out to be transmasculine. Do you know anything about this?
I have no idea.
Especially curious because my mom was on a progesterone supplement while she was pregnant with me.
Wow. Email me the study.
I'm trying to find it. I found it like last year and I haven't been able to find it since, but I'll email.
I'd love to see the study. Oh yeah. I'm just laughing at some of the comments in the chat. Yeah, I have no idea. That sounds like a wild assertion to make. I'd love to see. I want to see the science behind it. I want to see who made that happen. How many people?
Well, I also thought it was wild, but it's if I think to add to the wildness, it came from Harvard.
Wow. Yeah, any other questions? Oh, I saw a question there almost. Let's make this chat smaller. Ever since I got an HRT, it is a low T, and if that's the case, is there anything I can take to counteract? Who is asking as a trans feminine person? Yeah, that can be a thing with HRT, having low energy. I would maybe try taking some, oh geez, what would I do for energy? I think I would try to increase proteins, honestly, especially, how long have you been on HRT? A little over a year. Okay. Yeah, maybe try increasing your protein a little bit. You could try using a little eleuthero, a little Siberian ginseng, to increase your energy level. That would just be like a tonic. You could do like 30 and 90 drops 3 times a day. That typically raises people's energy up pretty good. I think something like drinking a lot of Tulsi actually might be helpful as well. And oh, you know what? Rosemary tea is quite lovely to stimulate a lot of energy. It's kind of like coffee without the caffeine rush. It's just very invigorating. Just a cup of rosemary tea, it's quite lovely. Or you could try drinking This will be annoying because if you're on spironolactone, you might be peeing more, but like drink like a good quantity of Nettles tea in the morning. Do like 30, like a 32-ounce bottle, like one of these. Just drink one of these, maybe with like Tulsi. You can put your Eleuthero in there and stuff. And drink that, and that is super energizing. Sometimes herbalists will put people on that when they're quitting coffee because it's so energizing. Yeah, I would try those. But remember too that like, yeah, you're having a lot of shift in your body and stuff. That's why I said the protein maybe, because it's like, you might be tired because it's like, your body's trying to build you up into like your wildest dreams. And that takes some energy, but also, yeah, estrogen, that's one of the side effects of estrogen is it can feel a little low. Adaptogens might be nice. Yeah. Oh my God. I would do that. I would do that too. Who wouldn't do that? I go back in time and be like, look at me now, to myself. I know that's maybe not a herbal related statement.
Yeah, can you recommend some herbs for going back in time?
Herbs for going back in time?
I guess that's like anti-aging herbs.
I know. Seriously.
I mean time travel.
Herbs for going back in time. I actually don't know herbs for going back in time. I mean, maybe like acid. I don't know. But I'll finish on this thing. Like, there's like a whole giant list. And you know what? Let me see if I can do this. So there's a long list of herbs that, someone was like, herbs have energy, and all herbs have different energetics. And herbs have helped me in my transition, ridiculously so. And sometimes you can have a lot of, it won't let me paste something like gratuitously huge. But I'll post it on my website, like right after this, which I'll put here. Okay, so that's my website, and there's a whole bunch of herbs that are just energetic herbs. And you just take 1 to 3 drops at a time in a day. And it just works on a spiritual level. And, I feel like, without sounding too woo, like a ton of questions have been revealed to me about like what I need to do for myself in my transition through the use of flower essences, which is just basically vibrational energetic medicine. And also, like, I feel like when I think of going back in time, I think of like trauma. And I've been able to really go back in time and like address traumas that have happened to me in my transgender life through the use of flower essences. And there's kind of nothing like flower essences to do that kind of work. And we didn't really get to it now, but like, on this list, there's things for seeing through one's mask, connecting trans women ancestors, for those overshadowed by cis partners, that's blue flag, there's stuff for accepting your physical body imperfections and all. And they can be a super nice adjunct to like all the other stuff people are doing to feel good about themselves and learn about themselves and like be on their transition path. And to just maybe end where I started, to say like the profound aspect of herbs is that they connect all the dots between like, oh, let's say I'm like, I go to therapy, I got my self-care, I got my HRT, maybe I have my non-surgical, non-HRT transition vibe happening. What else is there? And then the use of herbs is kind of like the binding glue element that can really like get all of those things activated and spiraling in the right direction. And even if the herbs are not right for you and you're transitioning and having hormone stuff, they're kind of good for everyone on that level of like synthesizing all of your self-care stuff.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Two questions actually. First question is, how does one become a trans herbalist themselves?
Oh,
And then two, I'm gonna get bottom surgery next year. I'm trans masculine, so I'm gonna get a PP. Very exciting, but it's also like many surgeries. So I was just wondering if you have any recommendations for like how do you prepare and like anything I can take for like post-surgery healing.
Yes. Yes, I'm so glad you asked that because I missed that in here. Okay, so basically, let's start with the surgery stuff. And this is good for like surgeries, period. So basically 3 weeks before the surgery, you want to try to like eat as low carb as possible. Now that's not like zero carb, but just limit them. And increase healthy fats like omega-3s. You know, you could supplement omega-3. Things like, so that's like avocados, olive oil, right? And that sets the tissues up for healing. And that reduction of carbs is anti-inflammatory. And when you're walking into surgery, it's like you kind of want to be like the most open, aqueous body you can be. So we're kind of like strengthening everything by like opening up and getting everything moving. I have a recommendation of taking this the 3 weeks before herbs, which is echinacea and reishi. And ashwagandha and skullcap and like a little Oregon grape. And you basically just blast that like 30 to 90 drops 3 times a day. And then stop 3 days before the surgery. So just no herbs, boot. They'd probably ask you to stop eating a day before the surgery and then be off your like whatever meds like a week before the surgery. And then after the surgery, 3 days after the surgery, you want to go in with gotu kola and calendula, echinacea again, ceanothus, and taking that like 4 droppers full 4 times a day. And so that is just going to keep the lymph moving. It's, and before the surgery, eat a ton of bioflavonoids. So it's like blueberries, all the dark berries, rose hips. Yeah, stuff like that. Blackberries. Because those are also anti-inflammatory. And yeah, and then after the pain pills, they'll probably give you pain pills. And then to transition out of that, sometimes you can use pedicularis. Herbalists on the West Coast will have that. not a store thing. You got to find an herbalist. And then for scars and stuff, after anything is removed, like for top surgeries, after the drains are removed, any other surgeries like rosehip seed oil, calendula, and an herb I don't really know, but it's called helichrysum essential oil. Probably only need a tiny little drop of that. You just rub those around and on the like scars, and it should make the scars heal up pretty good. And how do you become a trans herbalist? You be a fucking nerd about plants. Like, go to bed on a pile of plant books all the time and follow around other herbalists like a child, just going, why? Oh my God. Or you could go to the store and just try one tea a month. I feel like after 2 years, you'd know a lot of different herbs, no? Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you asked that question right at the nick of time, right at the end.
Yeah, it's 6:30, so I don't want to cut anyone off if folks have more questions, but also this was so great and so much info was shared. Thank you so much, Violet.
Welcome. I hope some of that made sense.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna stop recording also, but